He walked in like it was any other Tuesday. Steel travel mug in one hand, jacket slung over his shoulder, humming something tuneless under his breath. Marshall always did that, hum like the world was fine. He checked the ops queue, nodded to Alan in logistics, and pulled up the Q1 deployment dashboard. Systems were running smooth, tickets were low, and the week was shaping up to be boring in all the ways he liked. No fires to put out, no late night scrambles. Just the quiet rhythm of 14 years in the same seat, same office, same silent expectation that he'd carry what no one else wanted to. He liked it that way. Reliable was his religion. I remember he texted me around 8:13 a.m., a photo of his whiteboard with the words, "No glitches yet," and a little frowny face. That was his version of flirting. I sent back a thumbs up and a coffee emoji like always. You'd never know a man was about to be gut-punched by a company he gave nearly half his adult life to. And hey, while I have your attention, if you're listening to this and haven't hit subscribe yet, please take a second to do it now. 97% of folks never do, and it really helps keep stories like this going. A like or a comment goes a long way too. Thanks for being here. It means more than you think. Back to it. Marshall's whole day was mapped out. 9:15 stand-up, 11:30 vendor sync, 2 disaster protocol review. The man ran ops like it was NASA, and every dashboard was a launch window. His girls, Cameron and Mia, used to joke that his brain had folders like his desktop. Organized chaos. He was the guy you called when the servers hiccuped. The vendor forgot a shipment, or the junior analyst accidentally deleted a quarter's worth of inventory data. Marshall didn't panic. He just fixed things. Quietly. There was comfort in that predictability. Every 2 weeks, the paycheck came. Every Sunday, he meal prepped chicken with too much garlic. Every spring, he took the girls to the same damn cabin in Hocking Hills where the Wi-Fi never worked and the board games were missing half the pieces. That man clung to routine like it was the only thing holding the world together, which is probably why it hit so hard when it broke. At 10:04 a.m., he got a calendar invite from HR. Quick sync, RM 214, 15 minutes, no context. He clicked it without thinking, took his mug, and made the short walk across the floor. Didn't even suspect. Said a dumb joke to Alan on the way out about HR finally offering kombucha in the kitchen. Laughed at his own joke. That's how calm he was. Room 214 was cold. HR always kept the AC too high, like it was hiding something. Inside were 2 people he barely knew. The director of people operations and someone from finance who didn't even say hello. No warm-up, no small talk. Just one line, delivered like they were reading it from a napkin. Effective next month, your salary will be adjusted to reflect our realigned operational priorities. Marshall blinked. Adjusted to what? The HR rep cleared her throat like she had peanut butter stuck to her dignity. 65% cut? You can take it or leave it. Budget constraints. He told me later, it wasn't even the number that did it. It was that no one could meet his eyes, that everything he'd done, the overnight shifts, the client saves, the system he built from scratch after their last outage, none of it made the cut. He didn't yell, didn't plead, he just nodded, said, "Got it," picked up his mug, walked out. He passed by Alan again and just said, "Looks like I'm taking a long lunch." By the time he got home, he'd texted me once. It happened. I didn't have to ask what it was. You could feel the end of something in the way those 2 words sat there. That night, he made dinner like usual. Chicken, too much garlic. Cameron asked if something was wrong. He told her the truth. I watched his hand shake while passing the salad. And I knew, right then, the Marshall I'd always known, the reliable man who kept everyone else's chaos at bay, was about to become someone new. And whatever Braverton had set in motion, they were not ready for what that man could do when he finally let go of being safe. I watched him stand at the sink that night, hands braced on either side like he was keeping the countertop from crumbling. The kitchen light caught just enough silver in his hair to make him look older than he was. He wasn't crying. Marshall didn't cry, he just stared into the drain like it owed him answers. They said it like I was lucky to get anything, he finally said. 65%. That's not a cut. That's a carve-out. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to a man who gave 14 years to a company that threw him in the discount bin without blinking? They cited budget constraints, he continued, voice low and steady. then looked everywhere but at me like I was already gone. He turned off the faucet, even though nothing was running. Just needed to stop something, I think. Earlier that day, it had been clinical. Room 214 again. Same two suits from HR and finance, like actors doing a matinee version of the same play they botched in the morning. The director leaned forward with a stack of paperwork already stapled and highlighted. Effective immediately, your salary will be adjusted. To what? He cut in. She blinked. We're moving forward with a 65% reduction. We're standardizing senior ops roles across the board, aligning with our new budgetary framework. He just sat there. No sigh, no outburst. Marshall was too seasoned for that. He'd seen junior engineers sob over missed promotions and watched directors pitch tantrums when their parking spots moved. He'd always believed in staying level, until now. Why me? He asked. The finance guy shifted like someone had nudged his moral compass too hard. The HR rep smiled like she'd practiced the line. You've always done more with less. We thought you'd be the most flexible. That's when something inside him cracked. Not enough to make noise, just enough that something stopped breathing. Because what they really meant was, you're the mule. You carry what we give you, without question. You're the guy who eats the losses so the org chart can stay bloated at the top. That line didn't just land, it dug in. You've always done more with less, like it was a compliment. He left the room without signing anything, left the papers on the table, his badge still clipped to his collar, said nothing on the walkout, nodded once at security. They didn't even check his bag. Later, when we sat on the couch, Mia curled up next to him, asking if he'd still be home in the mornings for pancakes. He swallowed so hard I could hear it. Always, kiddo. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. and found him at the dining table, laptop open, screen dimmed. He wasn't job hunting. He was going through old project logs, vendor records, calendar invites from years past, staring at patterns, putting things together. What are you looking for? I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't look up, just clicked through another folder. Truth. I didn't press, he was pulling at a thread only he could feel, something they underestimated, something they missed. I'd seen that look before. The way he got when the power grid failed in 2018 and he rebuilt 3 departments from scratch overnight, when the shipment glitch cost them 2 contracts and he patched a workaround before legal even noticed. Marshall wasn't just an obvious lead. He was the spine they didn't realize they'd already snapped. And now? Now he was looking for a pressure point. The storm didn't start that night, but the wind changed. You could feel it. They thought they'd cut his pay and keep his silence. They forgot who they were dealing with. Dinner was leftover chicken and rice, again. Microwave humming, table quiet, the kind of silence you can't season out with salt. Cameron, his eldest, scrolled her phone while Mia pretended to care about steamed broccoli. I watched Marshall lower himself into the chair like every joint hurt more than it should have for a man his age. He had that polite mask on, the one he used when vendor calls went sideways or the server room was a degree too hot. We need to talk, he said, barely above the clink of the forks. Cameron looked up first. She always noticed before Mia did. Is it Grandpa? No, he shook his head. Nothing like that. Mia was still chewing when he said it. I'm being cut. 65%. Effective next month. Forks stopped. Silence. Then Cameron blinked and said the kind of thing only a 17-year-old with too much empathy and too little experience would ask. Should I defer college? It hit him like a backhand. I saw it in his jaw. That little twitch that meant he was holding something back. Anger, grief, panic. I don't even think he knew which. He just shook his head, voice low. No, you go. But Dad, you go, he said again, firmer this time. And that was it. He scraped his chair back, stood up, and walked into the hallway. Mia whispered, Are we okay? I told her yes, but I wasn't sure I believed it. An hour later, after dishes and arguments over algebra homework, I found him in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed like he was waiting for a verdict. He hadn't even taken his shoes off. His laptop was open beside him, but the screen was dark. You need to get some rest, I said gently. He nodded like he heard me, but his fingers moved anyway. Tap, tap, password in, screen on. Not Indeed, not LinkedIn. His inbox. He wasn't looking forward. He was digging backward. "You job hunting?" I asked, even though I knew better. He didn't answer. I sat beside him and watched as he searched through old emails, years' worth. Internal memos, status updates, policy changes, vendor contracts, cost realignment plans. The digital paper trail of a man who'd always kept the receipts, even if no one asked him to. And then he froze. There it was. A forwarded file from nearly 6 months ago, buried in a reply chain about system licensing renewals. He clicked it open. Finance report. Q1, Q2 workforce optimization strategy. I saw the color drain from his face. "This wasn't supposed to be attached," he muttered. "What is it?" He scrolled. Line items, projections, and then a line I'll never forget because he read it aloud like it tasted sour. Phase 1, offshore migration of 60% mid-level operations and fulfillment roles. Discrete implementation recommended to preserve performance morale until transition finalizes. That was dated 5 months before they called him in. They hadn't cut his pay because of budget constraints. They cut it because they needed him out, quietly, without notice, without risk of him making noise. He wasn't being realigned. He was being erased. That's when the fury showed up. Not loud, not wild, but quiet and cold and focused. He clicked back into his inbox and typed 3 words into the search bar. Realignment strategy proposal. Enter. Thread after thread. Terms like efficiency overlay, talent consolidation, and Q2 absorptive transition flashed on screen like a corporate obituary for everything he'd built. I didn't say a word, just sat there, watching as he pulled at the seams, finding every stitch they tried to hide. Marshall didn't sleep that night. He didn't rant or rage, he gathered. And when I brought him coffee at sunrise, he was already showered, dressed, and staring at a note he'd scribbled by hand. 7 names, 7 people he trusted. I didn't have to ask what it meant. He wasn't going down, he was taking the stairs, 1 step at a time, and he wasn't going alone. 6 months ago, on a Thursday that should have been forgettable, Marshall caught something he wasn't meant to see. He was reviewing a batch of system licenses tied to Braverton's warehouse API. Typical ops grunt work no one wanted to do, but everyone depended on. Vendors were shifting contract language, and someone from finance had attached the wrong spreadsheet to an internal ping. At first glance, it looked like a cost projection file, nothing unusual. But Marshall had a habit. He didn't skim. He read. And on page 4, sandwiched between procurement budgets and tax credits, was a phrase that made him pause mid-sip of his coffee. Offshore migration strategy, Q1, Q2 implementation pathway. It wasn't bolded. It wasn't highlighted. It wasn't even labeled confidential, just sitting there, hidden in plain sight. He read on. Initial impact to be buffered by non-executive payroll consolidation and reclassification. Emphasis on mid-level ops and supply chain redundancies. Strategy to be executed under the umbrella of performance-based realignment. Risk of attrition acceptable. He stared at the screen for a full minute, not moving, not blinking, not breathing, I think. Then he did what Marshall always did when he found something off. He flagged it, quietly, formally, no drama. He replied to the thread. Noticed offshore migration notes embedded in budget doc. Was this intentional? Suggest clarification before this circulates further. That was it. He didn't escalate it to anyone outside his lane, didn't forward it to the union rep, didn't print it and staple it to the VP's desk like he probably should have. He was loyal. Too loyal. No one replied. The thread went cold. By Monday, the file was replaced with a new version, minus the offending section. No apology, no explanation. Just a silent scrub job like it had never existed. He let it go, for a while. Told himself it was a mistake. That someone upstairs realized how bad it would look and course-corrected. He gave them the benefit of the doubt. Marshall had always given Braverton more faith than it deserved. But now, sitting at our kitchen table with that same file reopened and the same phrases staring him down, he saw it for what it was. A quiet kill list. And he'd been on it the whole time. They didn't call it firing. They called it reallocation. They didn't slash people. They de-risked the operational grid. And Marshall, Mr. Clean Up the Mess, had been helping hide the bloodstains without realizing he was bleeding too. And the worst part? They assumed he wouldn't put it together. They thought the man who built their disaster protocols and wrote the very systems that kept their logistics from eating itself was too dumb, too compliant, too grateful to notice he was being replaced. They thought if they kept the tone polite and the severance quiet, he'd walk away with his head down and his loyalty intact. But Marshall remembered everything. He remembered when HR asked for anonymized employee metrics to help benchmark redundancy factors. He remembered when the finance team started asking for non-core skill groupings for org chart overlays. He remembered how the VP of Ops started avoiding eye contact around Q1 planning, like guilt wore a badge. And now? Now he had context. Now the silence around that email wasn't just corporate forgetfulness. It was targeted strategy. They phased him out months ago. The pay cut was just the final insult, served cold, wrapped in legalese, designed to make it seem like he was lucky to still have a seat at a table they'd already cleared. He closed the file, leaned back, and whispered something that chilled me. "They think I'm replaceable." He said it not like a question, like a promise. That night he made 2 lists, one labeled keep, one labeled watch. I asked what he was doing. "Inventory," he said, "of who still thinks I matter." He wasn't planning revenge, not yet, but he'd stopped waiting for an apology and started preparing for an exit they wouldn't see coming. The call came at 8:06 a.m. sharp. I was pouring cereal for Mia when I saw Marshall pause mid-reach for the coffee pot. His phone lit up, an unknown number. Normally, he'd let it go to voicemail, but something about the timing, something in his bones maybe, made him answer. "This is Marshall." There was a silence. Then a voice, smooth as polished stone. "Mr. Renner, we've had our eye on you for years." He glanced at me. I froze. The voice continued, measured and confident. "We're aware of Briverton's recent internal shifts. We'd like to talk about your future. 160K base, 25K sign-on, full autonomy. Bring your team." He didn't say anything. Just walked to the window like he was trying to find a horizon. "We know about the offshore migration plan," the voice said, casually dropping a bomb like it was weather. "We're already prepping for the aftershock, but we don't want the mess. We want the solution. We want you." Marshall finally spoke. "Why now?" A chuckle. "Because now you're free, and because they've underestimated the only person keeping their house standing." Then the closer. "All we need is a green light, and the names. Stratacore. Even I'd heard of them. Braverton's fiercest competitor. Cleaner tech, leaner execs, better culture, or so the rumors said. They'd tried poaching Marshall 3 years ago during that supply chain crisis, but he hadn't even taken the meeting. Said loyalty mattered. Now, loyalty had left him with a 65% insult and a box full of unpaid favors. He ended the call without agreeing, just said, "I'll think about it." But I could see it. The way his fingers drummed the counter, the way his jaw clicked when he was calculating risk. He was thinking about it. Hard. Later that day, he pulled out an old notebook, spiral-bound, dog-eared from years of battle. I knew that notebook. It wasn't for plans. It was for war. He started listing names. People who'd stuck through budget freezes and last-minute overtime. Folks who showed up when the flood hit the lower warehouse and stayed until 3 a.m. Mopping. The ones who didn't play politics, who didn't kiss VP rings or inflate spreadsheets to impress interns with MBAs. He made 2 columns. Trust? Maybe. And next to each name, he wrote a note. Strengths, risks, family status, whether they were likely to jump ship, whether they had NDAs that could be neutralized with job descriptions that sidestepped legal landmines. It was surgical, not malicious, just exact. That night, he took a walk, said he needed air. He came back smelling like the wind before a storm. "Did you call them back?" I asked. He nodded. "They'll send the offer in writing. No non-compete issues. They did their homework." "And you?" "I'm just catching up." Then he opened his laptop and began cross-referencing internal org charts with project ownership trees. He wasn't poaching. Not yet. He was preparing an extraction, one he could execute in silence. He didn't want headlines. He wanted control. And Stratacore didn't just offer a job. They offered leverage. All Marshall had to do was say yes, and give them 7 names. He didn't use email. Not for this. Marshall started making calls on a Thursday evening just after 7 p.m. when kids were in bed, TVs were humming in the background, and people answered their phones without putting on their office voice. Each call was the same rhythm: quiet, calm, no pitch, no promises, just facts. I'm leaving Braverton. I've received an offer from Stratacore, 160K base, full autonomy. They want people who get the work done without politics. I thought of you. A beat. There's room for 7. It won't be posted. This stays between us. If you're in, I'll send the next step. He didn't beg, didn't flatter. He spoke like a man handing you a lifeboat, but only once. By midnight, 5 had said yes. Jason from back-end ops, Liana from vendor logistics, Eddie from procurement, Maureen from fulfillment, who'd quietly saved an entire contract last year by staying 3 nights in the damn building, and Zoe, the junior systems analyst who'd been passed over twice for promotions she practically trained her replacements for. They all said the same thing, in different words. Thank you for not forgetting. Because that's what this was. A transfer of trust. Not a raid, not a mutiny. Just Marshall giving the people who had his back a way out before the house collapsed. The 6th call was to Nate, mid-level analyst. Smart, efficient, but always chasing proximity to power. Marshall hesitated before dialing, but history said give people the benefit of the doubt. He shouldn't have. Nate picked up, heard the offer, paused, and said, "That's big. Can I think on it?" Marshall agreed, told him to take a night. That was at 8:42 p.m. At 6:13 a.m. the next morning, an internal message pinged from Braverton's senior VP of Ops, Diane Kettering. "Marshall, when you get a chance, please stop by. Just want to check in." No subject, no detail, too early for casual concern, too smooth to be authentic. He knew. Nate had leaked. He didn't reply. Instead, Marshall opened a draft he'd saved years ago, a simple internal tool never officially documented, designed to simulate a compliance audit freeze, the kind of break glass in case of crisis script that halted active update privileges across logistics dashboards, cleared real-time tracking queues, and triggered backup protocol checks that required dual authentication from roles that no longer existed. He had built it in 2019 after a shipment bug took down 2 entire districts, and the CTO blamed human error. He called it DLP, Deadlock Loop Protocol. It was never deployed, not officially, but Marshall kept the keys. At 7:02 a.m., he submitted a PTO request, 1 week, starting Monday. Simple, innocuous, sent to the general inbox. At 7:04 a.m., DLP was quietly activated from a remote node, clean, silent, and without flags. By 7:06 a.m., Braverton's internal task routers had started auto-looping. No one noticed at first. Everything looked fine, until it didn't. By noon, Liana called to confirm onboarding paperwork had gone through. Stratacore was thrilled, said they'd triple her vendor budget in Q3. Eddie texted Marshall a meme of a burning warehouse with the caption, "Not my circus anymore." Zoe's message hit harder. "Never thought I'd feel seen by a company." But Marshall didn't respond to any of it. Not yet, because the trap wasn't done closing. At 1:21 p.m., Diane sent a second message, this one less subtle. "Need to speak with you urgently. Ray unauthorized outreach to staff." Marshall didn't reply. By 1:37 p.m., access to the Master Ops dashboard glitched. Not crashed, just stalled. Task trees froze. Routing rules looped back. Auto-prioritization logic failed its heartbeat check. The queue began eating itself. And Marshall? He was sitting in our backyard, sipping iced tea, watching the wind move through the trees. Not hiding. Waiting. Because the systems they took for granted were built by a man they didn't respect. And now that man was gone. And so was the trust that kept their world running. He didn't burn the bridge. He simply stopped holding it up. They held the quarterly showcase like they always did, over-polished, over-rehearsed, and under-informed. Braverton's execs loved theater, stage lighting, live dashboards projected on 20-foot screens, fake smiles hiding power grabs. This quarter's was no different. Except this time, the theater was missing its stagehand. Marshall didn't tell us he was watching, but I knew. He had the live stream window open in the corner of his screen, muted, while he updated onboarding paperwork for the 7th member of his new team. The final seat had been filled. And across town, Diane Kettering, the same VP who'd rubber-stamped his pay cut, stepped up to the mic with a too-tight blazer and a smirk, like she'd already decided this was her victory lap. "Welcome, everyone," she said, teeth glowing. "As we continue to streamline operations and drive forward our Q1 priorities, you'll see a Braverton that's leaner, faster, smarter." She clicked a remote, and behind her, the dashboard flickered to life. Or tried to. The timeline graphic stuttered. The scheduling wheel spun. Someone coughed. She clicked again. The task forecast loaded, half of it. The remaining sectors were grayed out, time-stamped with a date from 3 years ago. A murmur passed through the audience. Interns looked at each other. Vendor reps squinted at their tablets. "Minor delay," Diane said, trying to wave it off. "We've had a recent back-end update, but everything is fully under control." She gestured again. The shipment tracker opened. Nothing moved. And then, as if some hidden hand had chosen the most inconvenient moment possible, a system alert blinked onto the projection. "Root task deadlock, escalation node undefined." Not a crash. Worse. A protocol loop with no resolution path, built by Marshall back in 2019 when the system was still duct tape and wishful thinking. He'd hidden it deep, only triggered by rare condition stacking, and now it was live. Because Braverton wasn't broken, it was empty. They didn't lose Marshall. They lost institutional memory, the kind that can't be trained in 30 days or outsourced to a consultant with a 5-tab spreadsheet and a buzzword binder. You could feel it. The silence in the room thickened. Diane's voice cracked for the first time. "It is resolving a minor conflict." But the live chat was already exploding. Clients asking why their dashboard queues were returning null. Regional managers asking why task trees had looped back to incomplete protocols. And legal? Legal was in the back row, furiously whispering into a phone. Because something worse than system failure was happening. Contracts weren't being fulfilled, and worse still, the automation logs were frozen mid-execution. It wasn't sabotage, it was abandonment. No one left knew how to operate the guts of the system. They knew how to present it, how to brag about it, how to commodify the result. But the machine? Only one person had ever understood the whole map, and he was gone. And so was most of the team who could fix it. As the projector behind her blinked, "Access invalid, credential auth missing," Diane reached for her water like it might save her. It didn't. At Stratacore, Marshall sat with his team in a plain glass conference room. The view overlooked the river. Calm, clean, paid for. He leaned back in his chair and said one thing. "They finally saw what I kept from breaking." No anger, no gloating, just quiet recognition. Braverton hadn't lost to a better product. They'd lost to the very people they thought they could discard. And now their star VP was standing in front of a full room, watching her dashboard die in real time. Marshall never touched a single wire. He just stopped answering their calls. The cease and desist arrived in a stiff white envelope. Couriered, hand-signed, stamped with faux authority like a paper shield would stop a storm already rolling in. Marshall read it once, then twice, slower. I watched his lip curl, just barely. "Cute," he muttered. Inside, the usual legal growl, allegations of breach, demands for immediate cessation of competitive activity, warnings of legal escalation. But what they didn't know, what legal should have known, was that Marshall's original employment contract, buried beneath 14 years of HR bloat, held a clause no one had bothered to revisit. Section 11.4, Non-compete restrictions, waived for roles pertaining to emergency protocol development and disaster recovery systems, contingent upon project-level criticality. He'd insisted on that clause during a restructuring back in 2014, after patching a warehouse flood system that saved them $3.2 million in damage. The execs had been grateful then, thankful enough to sign whatever language protected their savior. And now? Now it protected their exit wound. Stratacore's legal team didn't flinch. Their response was one line. Our client's employment agreement contains no enforceable non-compete provisions under the specific terms of his original role. This correspondence constitutes harassment. Further communication should be directed to counsel. Translation: back off, or we make this public. And then someone did make it public. The quarterly showcase recording leaked. Not through us, not through anyone Marshall had called. Just a Braverton employee, anonymous, disgruntled, armed with a screen recording of Diane Kettering stammering through frozen dashboards and blinking error messages. Posted to a private tech forum, shared, downloaded, circulated. By morning, it had made its way to half a dozen procurement directors. And then the calls started. Not to Braverton, to Stratacore. One by one, clients looking for contingency partners began requesting temporary support and consultation on fulfillment migration. Phrases that meant, "We saw what happened and we're not risking our quarter on their hubris." By the end of the week, Stratacore had converted 4 of Braverton's legacy clients. Not stolen, absorbed. Because what client wants to stay with a vendor mid-freefall, especially when the engineer who held the whole system together now works across the river, smiling quietly in a glass-walled office and answering every question with calm precision? Braverton's board panicked. Not publicly, no press releases, no statement. But inside, they knew. Their offshoring strategy had been timed to coincide with Marshall's realignment. The plan was to gut quietly, automate loudly, and hope the seams didn't show before bonuses cleared. Instead, they lost their senior operations architect, 6 team leads, a functional backend, 4 major clients, and any illusion of control. I asked Marshall, one night as we sat on the balcony watching the city blink under a warm spring sky, if he felt guilty. "No," he said. "They handed me the fuse and begged me not to notice it was lit." He didn't break them. He just stopped insulating them from their own bad decisions. And now, all Braverton could do was scramble, spin, and hope no one else read Section 11.4 as closely as Stratacore's lawyers did. Because the moment that envelope hit his desk, Marshall didn't flinch. He smiled and called it confirmation. The new office smelled like fresh paint and expensive coffee. Clean walls, soft lighting, not a speck of that desperate hustle Braverton had bred into its bones. No flickering fluorescent bulbs, no half-eaten bagels abandoned beside budget printouts. Just space, and the quiet confidence of a company that knew its value. Marshall stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, sleeves rolled up, tie forgotten in a moving box. His name was already on the glass door, Director of Strategic Fulfillment. He didn't ask for a fancy title. Stratacore gave it to him anyway. "Dad, where does this one go?" Mia held up a framed photo, one of the rare ones. The 3 of them in matching hoodies, hiking some muddy trail with weather that couldn't decide if it was spring or stubborn winter. "Put it on the shelf behind the desk," he said, facing the door. Cameron was hunched over a stack of textbooks on the floor, eyes darting back and forth. "Didn't you say you'd miss the quiet when I left?" He chuckled. "I lied." She'd been accepted. Full scholarship. First choice school. The morning the letter arrived, she screamed so loud the neighbors thought someone died. Marshall just held the paper, stared at the words, and said nothing for a full minute before walking out to the porch. I found him sitting there, crying silently into a mug that had long gone cold. He never said it aloud, but we all knew. That letter didn't just mark her future. It validated his. A knock at the glass broke the moment. Stratacore's CEO, Elise Marston, stepped inside. No entourage, just a smile, a calm presence, and a small black folder in hand. "I wanted to stop by," she said, offering a firm handshake. "You've made quite the entrance." Marshall smirked. "Didn't mean to make a mess." "Oh, but you didn't," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "You just stopped cleaning up theirs." Then she asked, "Why now?" He didn't rush the answer, just looked past her at the skyline, hand resting on the windowsill like he was grounding himself. "I was loyal for 14 years, he said. "They thought I was too proud to walk. They were wrong." He didn't say it with venom. He said it like a eulogy. Elise nodded. "Let us know if you need anything." After she left, he finally opened the folder. Inside, Braverton's client roster, not sent maliciously, just routine intel gathered by Stratacore's inbound team. Half the names had already been crossed out in red. The other half? Not if, but when. Mia walked up beside him, eyes wide. "What is that?" He closed the folder. "An inheritance." Not one they gave him. One they forced him to take, by mistaking quiet for weak and loyalty for fear. Marshall never wanted revenge. He wanted to build something. And now, in an office filled with the laughter of his daughters, surrounded by a team that chose him, he finally had what Braverton never gave, not just a role, a legacy. He pulled the picture of the hike closer to the edge of the shelf and smiled at it, then turned toward the door, already ready for whatever came next.